I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 32, and I'm standing on the manicured lawn of my new $5.2 million mansion. I still hear the echo of my parents' dismissive words. You'll never own a house like your brother. The irony isn't lost on me as I watch Thomas pull up in his Mercedes, his jaw dropping at the sight of my estate. After years of living in his shadow, the tables have finally turned. I hold up the keys, my fingers steady despite my racing heart. Welcome to my housewarming, little brother. Surprised? Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me on this journey of sweet revenge and personal growth. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Boston, it didn't take long for me to understand my place in the family hierarchy. From birthday celebrations to daily interactions, the message was clear. Thomas was the golden child, and I was an afterthought. Our childhood home on Maple Street wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable, a 2-story colonial with 4 bedrooms and a small backyard where Thomas would practice baseball while Dad pitched. I'd watch from my bedroom window, working on science projects or coding on the secondhand computer I'd saved up for by babysitting neighborhood kids. "Richard, come look at this program Cassie created," Mom would occasionally say, glancing at my computer screen with mild interest. Dad would barely turn his head. Later, Diana. Thomas is about to perfect his curveball. Later never came. When Thomas turned 13, my parents enrolled him in Westfield Academy, a prestigious private school known for its connections to Ivy League universities. The tuition cost more than what many families in our neighborhood made in months. What about Cassandra? Our neighbor Mrs. Peterson once asked my mother during a community barbecue, "Will she be going to Westfield too?" My mother laughed lightly, touching Mrs. Peterson's arm. "Oh, Cassandra is doing just fine at Lincoln Public. Besides, she's not really the Westfield type, more of a bookworm than a social butterfly." I was standing close enough to hear, pretending to be engrossed in a book. My cheeks burned as I processed what not the Westfield type really meant. Not worth the investment. Family dinners were exercises in invisibility. Dad would ask Thomas about his day-first baseball practice, student council meetings, the elite social circles he navigated with ease. My mother would beam with pride, serving Thomas an extra portion of whatever she'd prepared. "And how was your day, Cassandra?" Mom would eventually ask, almost as an afterthought. Any achievement I mentioned was met with polite nods, before conversation inevitably swung back to Thomas. When I got straight A's, it was expected. When Thomas got B's, it was celebrated as a triumph over his busy social and athletic schedule. My father, Richard Mitchell, was an investment banker who saw Thomas as his legacy. From teaching him to tie a Windsor knot to explaining stock market fluctuations, Dad was grooming Thomas to walk in his footsteps. Meanwhile, my interest in computer programming was treated as a quirky hobby that would eventually give way to something more suitable for a young woman. During my junior year of high school, I created a program that automatically organized and categorized research data. Nothing revolutionary, but advanced enough to win the state science fair. The award ceremony fell on the same day as Thomas's regional baseball championship. My parents didn't hesitate in their choice. "You understand, don't you, sweetheart?" Mom said, smoothing my hair as if I were still a child. This game could get Thomas scouted for college scholarships. I accepted my award alone, the gold medal feeling heavier than it should as I looked out at the audience filled with other families, all beaming with pride. When I returned home, the house was buzzing with celebration. Thomas's team had won, and our living room was filled with his teammates and their parents. My science fair trophy was placed on a side table, eventually obscured by pizza boxes and soda cans. "Oh, honey, we're so proud of you too," Mom said when she finally noticed me standing in the doorway, clutching my medal. "But let's not steal Thomas's thunder tonight, okay?" Those experiences shaped me in ways my family never understood. Each dismissal, each comparison, each moment of being overlooked didn't break me. They forged something stronger inside me. A determination that grew quietly, like roots beneath concrete, waiting for the right moment to break through. Thomas, meanwhile, grew increasingly entitled, Being constantly praised and prioritized gave him an inflated sense of his own abilities and importance. He began to believe he deserved special treatment, not just from our parents, but from everyone. When things didn't go his way, his charm would curdle into manipulation or anger. "Why are you always so serious?" he'd ask me, ruffling my hair condescendingly when we were teenagers. "Nobody likes a girl who tries too hard, Cassie." What Thomas and my parents failed to realize was that their treatment wasn't diminishing me. It was preparing me for a world where nothing would be handed to me, where I'd have to fight for everything I achieved. And fight I would. College represented freedom, my chance to finally escape the suffocating shadow of familial favoritism. While Thomas headed to Princeton with our parents' full financial backing, complete with a new car and a generous monthly allowance, I cobbled together scholarships, student loans, and part-time jobs to attend MIT. My tiny dorm room became my sanctuary. For the first time, my achievements weren't immediately compared to Thomas's. My professors evaluated my work on its own merits, and my peers respected my abilities. I thrived in this environment, double majoring in computer science and business while working 20 hours a week at the campus tech support center. "You're running yourself into the ground," my roommate Zoe would say, watching me gulp down my third cup of coffee at 2 a.m. "I'm building something," I'd reply, eyes fixed on my screen where lines of code represented possibility, a future I was designing one sleepless night at a time. By junior year, I developed a reputation in the department for innovative solutions to complex problems. My senior project became my obsession, a security application that used behavioral patterns to identify potential breaches before they happened. It wasn't just theoretical, it worked. My advisors were impressed enough to suggest I consider commercializing it after graduation. When Thanksgiving break came around my senior year, I returned home with genuine excitement for the first time in years. I had something tangible to show for all my hard work, something even my parents couldn't dismiss. Our family gathered around the dining table, the familiar dynamic settling in like dust. Dad carved the turkey, giving Thomas the first and largest portion. Mom fluttered around refilling drinks, always attending to Thomas's glass before anyone else's. When the conversation turned to future plans, Thomas boasted about the investment banking internship Dad had secured for him. "They normally don't take juniors," he said, smirking. But Dad's connections pulled through. "That's wonderful, son," Dad beamed, raising his wine glass. To Thomas, following in the Mitchell financial tradition, after the toast and congratulations died down, I cleared my throat. "I've been working on something too," I said, pulling out my laptop, a security application that could revolutionize how companies protect their data. I opened my presentation, turning the screen so everyone could see. For the next 5 minutes, I explained my innovation in terms they could understand, highlighting its potential market value and real-world applications. Mom looked confused but made an effort to smile. Dad checked his watch twice. But Thomas was leaning forward, his eyes focused on my screen with unusual intensity. "That's nice, Cassandra," Dad finally said. "But is there really a market for something like that? Seems rather niche." "Actually," I countered, confidence unwavering. "Data security is projected to be a multi-billion-dollar industry within the next decade. Every company with digital assets needs protection." Thomas suddenly spoke up. "She's right, Dad. Cybersecurity is huge right now." His unexpected support caught me off guard, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of connection with my brother that had been absent for years. That night, Thomas knocked on my bedroom door, something he hadn't done since we were children. "That program you designed is seriously impressive," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "I'd love to hear more about it." For hours, we really talked for the first time in years. I explained the technical aspects in greater detail, and he asked intelligent questions about market strategy and potential investors. It felt like the beginning of a new relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than competition. "You should send me your business plan," he said as he left. "I might be able to help with some connections through my internship." I emailed him everything the next day, the complete business plan, technical specifications, even the prototype code. It felt good to share my vision with someone from my family who finally seemed to get it. 2 months later, I was buried in finals week when I received a congratulatory email from a former high school classmate who was now interning at a Boston venture capital firm. Saw your brother pitching your security app today. Didn't know you guys were working together. Impressive stuff. My blood ran cold. I immediately called Thomas, who didn't pick up. Then I called home. "Oh, Cassandra," Mom answered cheerfully. "Have you heard the wonderful news? Thomas has started his own tech company. Your father invested $50,000 to get him started. Isn't that exciting?" The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. I drove home that weekend, confronting my family at Sunday dinner. "You stole my idea," I said to Thomas, my voice steady despite the rage and hurt coursing through me. That security application was my work, my code, my design, my concept. Thomas had the audacity to look offended. "I refined your concept, Cassie. Your version was never going to get off the ground. You don't have the business connections or experience to make something like this work." "He's right, Cassandra," Dad chimed in. "Thomas has the business acumen to make this profitable. He's taking your academic project and turning it into something viable. Plus," Mom added, her expression placating, "you'll always be part of the story." Thomas even mentioned you'd helped with the initial concept. I looked at each of their faces, Thomas's smug confidence, Dad's dismissive pragmatism, Mom's willful blindness. In that moment, I realized a fundamental truth. My family would never see me clearly, never value me equally, never support my dreams the way they supported Thomas's. "Keep it," I finally said, standing up from the table. "Keep the stolen idea, the $50,000 investment, all of it. But don't expect me to be part of the story anymore." I packed a single suitcase that night, booked a one-way ticket to San Francisco, and left without saying goodbye. As the plane took off, I made a promise to myself. I would succeed on my own terms, without their support or approval. And someday, they would be forced to recognize what they'd thrown away. San Francisco welcomed me with fog-shrouded hills and sky-high rent prices. My first apartment was barely 400 square feet, a fifth-floor walk-up with a kitchenette smaller than my childhood bathroom. The mattress on the floor and the folding table, serving as both desk and dining area, were stark reminders of my new reality. But the window overlooking the city's twinkling lights gave me perspective. I was small in this vast tech ecosystem, but I was here, ready to climb. My degree from MIT landed me an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech company. The pay was enough to cover rent and ramen, with little left over for savings. But the real value was access to industry knowledge, to networks, to the inner workings of successful tech operations. By day, I debugged other people's code and sat through meetings where men talked over me. By night, I built something new, something mine fueled by convenience store, coffee, and the burning desire to prove my family wrong. 6 months into my San Francisco life, I was scrolling through tech news when I spotted it. Mitchell Security Solutions struggling despite angel investment. The article detailed how Thomas's company built on my stolen idea was failing to deliver on its promises to early investors. He'd rushed to market with a half-baked implementation that suffered from critical security flaws. The schadenfreude was sweet but fleeting. Thomas's failure wouldn't automatically translate to my success. I needed to focus on my own path forward. That path became clearer when I met Sarah Wilson at a Women in Tech mixer I almost didn't attend. At 45, Sarah was a venture capital veteran who had funded some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley. She was also one of the few women in the upper echelons of tech financing. "Your app concept is fascinating," she said after I nervously pitched her my latest idea, a communication platform with built-in encryption for healthcare providers. "But you're thinking too small. What's the bigger problem you're really trying to solve?" Her question kept me up that night, scribbling on whiteboards until 4 a.m. By morning, I had reconceptualized my entire approach. The healthcare app was just one application of what could be a comprehensive data security infrastructure for industries handling sensitive information. Sarah became more than an investor prospect. She became a mentor. She didn't coddle me. Her feedback was often brutally honest, but she saw potential where my family had seen only Thomas's shadow. "The tech world is full of Thomas Mitchells," she told me over coffee one morning. "Men who are good at talking the talk, raised to believe they deserve success. But sustainable businesses are built by people like you, those who understand the technology from the ground up and have the persistence to solve real problems. While I was rebuilding my professional foundation, Thomas's company continued its downward spiral. Through industry contacts, I learned he'd blown through Dad's $50,000 investment in 3 months, with nothing but a dysfunctional product and mounting debts to show for it. My first real success came from an unexpected direction. A simple mobile app I developed over a weekend to help myself track expenses caught the attention of a small business forum. Within a month, it had 50,000 downloads. The revenue wasn't life-changing, about $3,000 a month after platform fees, but it was validation. I had created something people wanted, something that solved a real problem. I lived like a college student, pouring every penny of profit back into development for my larger vision. There were moments I nearly gave up, like when my laptop died during a critical development phase, or when a potential investor laughed at my valuation estimates simply because I was just a girl with an idea. The closest I came to breaking was a year and a half after leaving Boston. I was down to my last $214, had been rejected by 12 investors in a row, and had just discovered a significant flaw in my core algorithm that would require weeks to fix. That night, my phone rang with a Boston area code. Cassie? It's Mom. It was the first contact from my family since I'd left. For a brief, vulnerable moment, I thought perhaps she was calling to reconcile, to acknowledge my independence. Thomas's company is in trouble, she said without preamble. The investors are threatening legal action, and we've already remortgaged the house to help him. We need money, Cassie. The laugh that escaped me was hollow. You're calling me for money? To bail out Thomas? He's family, Mom replied, as if that explained everything. And from what we hear, your little app is doing well. This is your chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I had always been to my family. Not a daughter or sister to be proud of, but a resource to be tapped for Thomas's benefit. The realization was both painful and liberating. I am part of something bigger than myself, I replied calmly. My own company. Good luck with Thomas. I hung up and cried for an hour, not from sadness, but from a strange combination of grief and freedom. Then I got back to work fixing my algorithm. That night marked a turning point. I wasn't just working to succeed anymore. I was working to create a success so undeniable, so monumental, that it would eclipse Thomas completely. No longer would I be the overlooked Mitchell sibling. I would build something that would make the Mitchell name synonymous with me, not him. The next morning, I withdrew my remaining savings, ate ramen for every meal, and hired a brilliant programmer I'd met at a hackathon to help solve my algorithm problem. 3 weeks later, we had a working prototype that exceeded my original specifications. 2 months after that, Sarah Wilson's firm offered initial funding of $250,000 for 10% equity. My climb had finally begun in earnest. The Hyperion data security platform launched with little fanfare, a press release, a modest booth at a tech conference, and a well-crafted pitch deck that Sarah helped me refine. What we lacked in marketing budget we made up for in innovation. Our system didn't just detect breaches. It predicted vulnerabilities based on user behavior patterns, adapting its protection protocols in real time. You've essentially created an immune system for data. Our first major client, the CTO of a healthcare startup, said during the implementation meeting, "This is exactly what we've been looking for." My team grew from just me to 3 employees, a front-end developer, a security specialist, and a sales associate, all working from a converted warehouse space in Oakland that cost half what similar offices went for in San Francisco. Every decision was calculated, every dollar stretched to its maximum potential. 6 months after launch, we hit our first million in revenue. I celebrated by upgrading from my mattress on the floor to an actual bed frame, though I still worked 16-hour days and reinvested 90% of my salary back into the company. My personal finances remained a careful balancing act, but Hyperion was thriving. Meanwhile, across the country, Thomas's company had finally collapsed under the weight of its technical debt and mismanagement. According to industry gossip, He'd lost not only Dad's initial investment, but also the additional funds from their remortgaged home. The schadenfreude I felt was complicated satisfaction, mingled with a strange sadness for my parents, who had gambled so much on the wrong child. After my first full year as CEO, I purchased a modest condo in Oakland, nothing extravagant, but mine. The day I got the keys, I stood in the empty living room and cried. It wasn't just about having property. It was proof that I could provide for myself what my parents had never believed I deserved. I didn't hear from my family during this time, though I occasionally checked Thomas's LinkedIn profile, which remained stuck at his failed company, listed as on hiatus. Part of me wondered if they even knew about Hyperion's success, or if they were still too focused on Thomas's setbacks to notice. The answer came unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon when my assistant buzzed my office. "There's a Thomas Mitchell here to see you. Says he's your brother." My heart stuttered. "Send him in." Thomas looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a humility in his posture I'd never seen before. His designer clothes had been replaced by a simple button-down and slacks that seemed a size too large. "Cassie," he said, standing awkwardly in my doorway. "Your office is impressive." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What brings you to California, Thomas?" He sat fidgeting with his watch, not the Rolex he'd gotten for his college graduation, I noticed, but something cheaper. "I've been following Hyperion's progress. You've built something remarkable." "Thank you," I said, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I'm here because..." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I need a job, Cassie. And not just any job. I need to learn from someone who knows what they're doing. Someone like you." The request stunned me. Thomas, who had always been positioned as my superior, was asking to work for me. The vindication was dizzying, but suspicion quickly followed. "Why should I trust you after what happened?" I asked directly. "Because I've hit rock bottom," he replied, his voice cracking slightly. "Dad lost the house because of me. Mom had to move in with Aunt Patty. Everything they invested in me is gone, and I have nothing to show for it." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I was wrong, Cassie. Wrong about you. Wrong about myself. I want to earn my way back not just into your life, but into a career I can be proud of." Against my better judgment, against Sarah's explicit advice, I hired Thomas in an entry-level sales position. Not out of family loyalty, but because I believed in second chances, and because a small, petty part of me wanted him to witness my success up close. To my surprise, Thomas excelled in sales. His natural charm, once used to manipulate family dynamics, translated well to building client relationships. He worked late, volunteered for difficult accounts, and showed a humility with colleagues that the old Thomas would have found beneath him. Months passed, and my wariness gradually softened. Thomas became a top performer, respected by the team, and seemingly genuine in his reformation. We even developed a tentative sibling relationship, occasionally grabbing lunch together or discussing industry trends after hours. During one such evening, after the office had emptied, Thomas brought a bottle of wine to my office to celebrate a major client acquisition. To Hyperion, he toasted, and to second chances. As we drank, our conversation turned to the future. Feeling unusually open, I shared my plans for Hyperion's next major product, a revolutionary approach to quantum encryption that would put us years ahead of competitors. "We're still in early development," I explained, pulling up preliminary designs on my secure server. "But when this launches next year, Hyperion won't just be a successful startup anymore. We'll be a major player in global data security." Thomas studied the screens with intensity, asking insightful questions that I answered in detail, pleased by his genuine interest in the technology rather than just the business implications. That night, I drove home feeling something I hadn't in years, a connection to my family through Thomas, and hope that perhaps people really could change. I had no idea I had just made the same mistake twice, with far higher stakes. The first sign something was wrong came at 3:17 a.m. when my phone erupted with security alerts. I bolted upright in bed, heart racing as I logged into our system remotely. Someone had accessed our development server specifically, the directory containing our quantum encryption prototype files. IP address is internal, our security chief, Raj, confirmed when I called him. Someone used an authorized credential within the building. By dawn, I was standing in our server room with Raj and our head of IT, reviewing security footage. The timestamp showed 2:08 a.m. The figure moving through the darkened office was immediately recognizable Thomas, using his keycard to enter areas he had no authorization to access, plugging a flash drive into a secure terminal. "We need to know what he took," I said, my voice hollow as the final pieces of trust I'd rebuilt crumbled away. The forensic analysis was definitive. Thomas had downloaded our entire quantum encryption architecture, including proprietary algorithms we'd spent millions developing. A quick check of his company email showed communications with Sentinel Systems, our largest competitor, going back 3 months. I canceled all meetings and waited in my office. Thomas arrived at 8:43 a.m., coffee in hand, wearing the same winning smile he'd used to charm our parents into giving him everything while I got nothing. "Morning, Cassie," he said cheerfully, stopping short when he saw my expression and the security guards flanking my desk. "What's going on?" I turned my monitor toward him, showing the security footage. "You tell me." The transformation was instant. His friendly facade vanished, replaced by the entitled, defensive Thomas I'd grown up with. "You don't understand the position you put me in," he snapped. "Sentinel offered me a director position, triple the salary. What was I supposed to do? Not steal from your own sister?" I suggested, my calm exterior belying the storm of rage and hurt within. Thomas laughed bitterly. "That's rich coming from you. You've always had everything handed to you, your precious MIT education, your natural talent with computers. You have no idea what it's like to work twice as hard just to stay in the game." The absurdity of his perspective was staggering. In what distorted reality had I been the privileged one? "You've been the golden child since we were born," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Mom and Dad gave you everything while I worked minimum wage jobs to put myself through college. They remortgaged their house for your failed company while I built mine from nothing. They believed in me because I was worth believing in," he shouted, his composure fully shattered. "Until you came along with your perfect grades and your coding trophies and made them doubt me. And now you've built this company to show me up, to prove you're better than me." In that moment, I realized Thomas's betrayal wasn't just about opportunity or money. It was about a lifetime of insecurity hidden beneath privilege. A fear that perhaps he wasn't special after all. That perhaps I, the overlooked sister, had been the truly capable one all along. "Security will escort you out," I said, signaling to the guards. "Your personal belongings will be sent to you. And, Thomas, our legal team is already preparing a corporate espionage suit against both you and Sentinel Systems." His face paled. "You wouldn't sue your own brother." "You're not my brother," I replied. "You're a thief who happens to share my DNA. And yes, I absolutely will sue you for every penny you and Sentinel are worth." As he was being escorted out, Thomas's phone rang. He glanced at it, then looked at me with a smirk. "That's Mom and Dad. Should I tell them their precious Cassie is throwing her only brother to the wolves over some computer code?" "Tell them whatever you want," I said. "I stopped caring about their opinion the day they chose you over me for the last time." Within hours, the calls started first, from Mom, then Dad, then both together. I let them go to voicemail, focusing instead on damage control with our investors and preparing our legal strategy. When I finally listened to their messages 3 days later, they were exactly what I expected. Pleased to drop the charges against poor Thomas. Reminders about family loyalty and guilt trips about how this would destroy your father's reputation in the financial community. Not once did they acknowledge what Thomas had done or express concern for me or my company. The lawsuit proceeded despite their protests. Our legal team was merciless, presenting irrefutable evidence of Thomas's theft and Sentinel's willing participation in corporate espionage. The discovery process revealed Thomas had been planted as a mole from the beginning. His tearful redemption story, nothing but a calculated performance to gain access to our proprietary technology. What Thomas and Sentinel hadn't counted on was that he hadn't fully understood what he'd stolen. The quantum encryption architecture required intricate knowledge of both quantum computing principles and advanced cryptography knowledge Thomas lacked. When Sentinel rushed to market with their stolen innovation, critical implementation flaws rendered their product vulnerable to the very attacks it was meant to prevent. The lawsuit ended in a decisive victory, a $15 million judgment against Sentinel Systems and a permanent industry blacklisting for Thomas. The financial compensation barely registered compared to the vindication of having my former competitors publicly acknowledge the theft and the superiority of Hyperion's legitimate technology. I used the settlement money strategically, acquiring 2 smaller security firms that complemented our technology stack and expanding our operations internationally. Within 18 months of the lawsuit's conclusion, Hyperion's valuation exceeded $100 million, and my own net worth, primarily tied to my company equity, crossed into 8 figures. Business publications that had once overlooked us began running profiles with headlines like Security's New Queen and Mitchell's Quantum Leap. My inbox filled with speaking invitations from conferences that had rejected my submissions years earlier. Success, it seemed, was the most effective form of revenge, but it wasn't enough to heal the wound of Thomas's second betrayal, or the lifetime of family dynamics that had enabled it. That healing would require something more complex than professional achievement, something I wasn't sure I was ready to pursue. For now, I focused on what I could control, building Hyperion into the company I had always envisioned, one that would dominate the security landscape, not through theft or shortcuts, but through genuine innovation and ethical leadership. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a plan began to form not just for professional dominance, but for a more personal reckoning with the brother who had twice betrayed me and the parents who had always enabled him. The quarterly industry newsletter landed in my inbox on a Wednesday morning. Normally, I'd skim it for competitor updates and potential acquisition targets, but one headline caught my eye. Former security exec Thomas Mitchell launches real estate venture in Boston. According to the article, Thomas had convinced a group of investors to back his new company, focused on revitalizing historic properties in Boston's emerging neighborhoods. The company's first target? The Harrington Building, a pre-war architectural gem near the waterfront that had sat vacant for decades. My coffee mug stilled halfway to my lips. The Harrington Building. The same building I'd written about in my high school architecture elective paper, a paper Thomas had mocked when he found it in my room, covered in my enthusiastic notes about preservation and urban renewal. You and your obsession with old buildings? He'd laughed. Nobody cares about this stuff, Cassie. But I had cared. That building represented everything I loved about Boston's history, its resilience, its dignity despite neglect, its potential for renewal. And now Thomas was positioning himself as its savior, probably without a single genuine thought about its historical significance. I closed my laptop and called my executive assistant. Danielle, clear my schedule for the next 3 days. I need to fly to Boston immediately. 24 hours later, I was sitting in the office of Marlene Winters, Boston's top commercial real estate attorney. You want to acquire properties surrounding the Harrington Building, she confirmed, glancing up from the notes she'd been taking. All of them? I nodded. Ideally through shell companies that can't be easily traced back to me or Hyperion. Marlene's eyebrow arched slightly. May I ask why? Let's just say I have a personal interest in ensuring the Harrington's restoration is done properly, I replied, my tone making it clear that was all the explanation I'd be offering. Over the next month, through a series of LLCs with nondescript names, I quietly acquired every property adjacent to the Harrington Building. Meanwhile, Thomas was making headlines in local business journals, boasting about his vision for the neighborhood. The Mitchell Development Group aims to transform this forgotten corner of Boston into a luxury destination, he told the Boston Business Chronicle. The Harrington will be our crown jewel high-end condominiums with waterfront views and exclusive amenities. What Thomas didn't know was that I'd already scheduled a meeting with the Boston Historical Commission and the City Planning Department, presenting a comprehensive neighborhood development plan that included affordable housing units, public green spaces, and careful historic preservation with the Harrington as its centerpiece. Miss Mitchell, this is exactly the kind of thoughtful urban renewal we've been hoping to see, the commission chair told me, clearly impressed by the architectural renderings and community impact assessments I'd commissioned. Your brother's proposal is, well, it's more focused on luxury development. My brother? I asked innocently. Thomas Mitchell. He's been quite vocal about his plans for the Harrington. I smiled. We haven't spoken in years. Different visions, I suppose. The next phase of my plan unfolded when Thomas's preliminary permit applications came before the zoning board. My legal team submitted formal objections based on historical preservation statutes and community impact concerns, all perfectly legitimate and backed by thorough research. Thomas's response was swift and predictable. A furious call to my hotel room at midnight. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Cassie?" he demanded when I answered. "First, you blacklist me from tech, and now you're sabotaging my real estate venture?" "I'm simply advocating for responsible development," I replied calmly. "Something you might want to consider. This is about the building, isn't it? That stupid paper you wrote in high school. You're obsessed." "Goodbye, Thomas," I said, hanging up and blocking his number. The following week, Thomas held a press conference on the steps of the Harrington, surrounded by investors and local business figures. He announced an accelerated timeline for the project, dismissing preservation concerns as bureaucratic obstacles to progress. What he didn't know was that I'd already secured the support of 3 prominent historical preservation societies who issued statements opposing any development that would compromise the Harrington's architectural integrity. Thomas's investors grew nervous as community opposition mounted and permit delays threatened their timeline. 2 pulled out entirely after my development plan became public, recognizing the superior approach to neighborhood renewal. The final confrontation came at the property auction. The Harrington's owner, facing mounting maintenance costs and tax issues, had decided to sell to the highest bidder. Thomas arrived with our father in tow, Richard Mitchell, making a rare public appearance to support his son's venture. They didn't notice me seated at the back of the room, nor my attorney positioned near the auctioneer's podium. Thomas looked confident, whispering to Dad as the bidding began. The starting price was $2.8 million, already steep for a building requiring extensive renovation. Thomas immediately bid $3 million. 2 other developers joined in, pushing the price to $3.5 million before dropping out. $3.5 million going once. The auctioneer called. Thomas and my father exchanged satisfied glances. $4.5 million. My attorney called out clearly. The room went silent. Thomas's head snapped around, searching for the new bidder. $4.6 million, he countered, his voice strained. $5 million. My attorney responded without hesitation. Thomas conferred frantically with my father, whose face had grown increasingly pale. $5.1 million, Thomas offered, desperation evident in his tone. I nodded to my attorney. $6 million, she stated firmly. A murmur ran through the crowd. Thomas stood frozen, clearly at his financial limit. The auctioneer called the bid 3 times, and the gavel fell with a decisive crack. Only then did I stand and walk to the front of the room to sign the paperwork. Thomas stared in shocked recognition, my father beside him, face flushed with anger and humiliation. The winning bidder, the auctioneer announced, is Cassandra Mitchell. I approached them afterward, contracts in hand. "You did this just to spite me," Thomas hissed, hands shaking. "No, Thomas. I did this because I care about this building, and this community always have. The fact that it foils your plans is just a satisfying bonus." I turned to my father, whose expression shifted between rage and disbelief. "Hello, Dad. Surprised to see what your less promising child can accomplish?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally managed, $6 million? For a dilapidated old building? For a piece of history that deserves protection, I corrected. "And don't worry about the money. I can afford it. My company is valued at over $100 million now, but you'd know that if you ever bothered to Google my name instead of just Thomas's." I left them standing there, my father's arm around Thomas's shoulders, the same protective gesture I'd seen countless times growing up, but never directed toward me. The difference was that now, it didn't hurt anymore. I didn't need his protection or approval. I had built something stronger than their dismissal. 3 days later, the Boston Globe ran a feature. Tech CEO Cassandra Mitchell saves historic Harrington building, plans community, focused renovation. The accompanying photo showed me standing before the building, the evening sun illuminating its ornate facade, a perfect visual metaphor for bringing something beautiful out of the shadows. Thomas and my father weren't mentioned anywhere in the article. 6 months after the Harrington acquisition, while overseeing the initial preservation work during a visit to Boston, I received an unexpected email from my mother. The subject line read simply, "Please read important." For a moment, my finger hovered over the delete button. Our last interaction, her call asking for money to bail out Thomas, had made it clear where her priorities lay. But curiosity won out, and I opened the message. "Cassandra," it began formally, "I hope this finds you well. Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking, especially since the Harrington situation. We've been speaking with a family therapist, Dr. Eleanor Bennett, who specializes in estrangement and reconciliation. She has suggested we try a family session, if you would be willing. No pressure or expectations, just a chance to be heard in a neutral space with a professional mediator. Please consider it. Mom." My immediate instinct was refusal. What could possibly be gained from revisiting old wounds? I had built a successful life without them. Their approval no longer mattered. Yet that night, staring at the Harringtons' illuminated facade from my hotel window, I found myself wondering what closure might feel like. Not reconciliation necessarily, but perhaps a chance to say the things I'd kept bottled up for years. To be heard, finally, by the people who had spent a lifetime not listening. I replied with my availability and a clear boundary. "I'll attend one session. After that, I'll decide if further contact is something I want." The therapist's office was in a converted brownstone near Harvard Square neutral territory, not the family home laden with memories of favoritism. Dr. Bennett, a woman in her 50s with calm eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted me in the waiting room. "I've spoken individually with your parents and brother," she explained, leading me to a comfortable room with chairs arranged in a circle. "Today is about creating a space for honest communication, not forced reconciliation. Everyone will have a chance to speak without interruption." My family was already seated when I entered. Mom looked older than I remembered, new lines etched around her eyes. Dad sat stiffly, uncomfortable in this setting that required emotional vulnerability. And Thomas seemed diminished somehow, his usual confident posture replaced by something more hesitant. "Cassandra," Mom said, half rising before sitting again, respecting the physical distance I'd maintained by choosing a chair across the circle. Dr. Bennett began by establishing ground rules. No interrupting, no personal attacks. Focus on I statements rather than accusations. Then she turned to me. "Cassandra, as the family member who was invited to this session, would you like to begin?" I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, but facing them, the carefully prepared speech dissolved. Instead, raw truth emerged. "I spent my entire childhood waiting for you to see me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Not as Thomas's sister, not as the daughter who wasn't quite good enough, but as me, Cassandra, a person with value, with dreams, with potential. I waited for decades, and you never did. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but Dad's jaw tightened defensively. "That's not fair," he interjected. "We supported you." "Richard," Dr. Bennett interrupted gently. "Please remember our ground rules. Cassandra has the floor." I continued, recounting specific memories, the science fair trophy buried under pizza boxes, the private school that was only for Thomas, the stolen business idea, the call asking for money without a single question about my life or well-being. The hardest part, I concluded, wasn't the favoritism itself. It was that you couldn't even see it. You genuinely believed you were treating us equally, when every action, every choice, every investment of time and money and emotional energy showed otherwise. When I finished, silence filled the room. Then Dad cleared his throat. "You've clearly rehearsed your grievances well," he said, the familiar dismissive tone creeping in. "But parenting doesn't come with a manual. We did our best with both of you." "Richard," Dr. Bennett intervened again. "Try to focus on hearing Cassandra's experience rather than defending your intentions." "Her experience is distorted," Dad insisted, color rising in his face. "We gave her every opportunity." "Like what?" I interrupted, my composure cracking. "Name one significant opportunity you gave me that you didn't give Thomas 3 of." When no answer came, Dad stood abruptly. "I didn't come here to be attacked. This was a mistake." He walked out, the door closing firmly behind him. Dr. Bennett let the moment breathe before turning to my mother. "Diana, Would you like to respond to what Cassandra has shared? Mom twisted her wedding ring nervously. I never meant to make you feel less important, she said finally. Your father has always had strong opinions about how things should be done, about Thomas following in his footsteps. It was easier to go along, to focus on Thomas because that kept the peace. Easier for whom? I asked quietly. For me, she admitted, the simple honesty surprising me. I was afraid of your father's disapproval, his temper. Thomas was easier to manage because he wanted what Richard wanted. You were always your own person with your own mind. That scared him, I think. And instead of protecting you from that, I took the path of least resistance. The acknowledgement, incomplete as it was, loosened something tight in my chest. Thomas spoke next, his usual confidence absent. I always knew I was the favorite, he said, staring at his hands. I used it against you, leveraged it for my own advantage, took what wasn't mine because I felt entitled to it. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Cassie, not just for the business idea or the Harrington play, but for a lifetime of benefiting from the imbalance instead of challenging it. I had expected denials, minimizations, the familiar family dynamic of making me the unreasonable one. This partial accountability, however fragile, was disorienting. Dr. Bennett suggested a follow-up session, which I agreed to attend if Dad wasn't present. In that second meeting, without Dad's defensive energy dominating the room, Mom spoke more openly about her regrets, and Thomas elaborated on his own journey of self-reflection following his professional failures. I spent my whole life believing I deserved success because Dad told me I did, he explained. When everything fell apart twice, I had to face the possibility that maybe I wasn't special after all. Maybe I'd just been propped up by privilege and favoritism. And maybe you succeeded because you actually had to work for everything. While I expected it handed to me, these conversations didn't erase the past, but they cracked open a door I'd thought permanently closed. I set clear boundaries. I wasn't ready for family holidays or regular contact, but I was open to occasional communication with Mom and, tentatively, with Thomas. Dad remained a closed subject, his refusal to participate in further therapy speaking volumes about his capacity for change. I want to believe people can grow, I told Dr. Bennett in our final session. I'm just not sure how much history I'm willing to carry into my future. Reconciliation doesn't mean forgetting, she replied. It means deciding what kind of relationship is possible now, with full awareness of the past and clear boundaries for the future. With those boundaries established, I cautiously allowed my mother and Thomas back into the periphery of my life. Mom began sending occasional emails, not demanding responses, but sharing small details of her life and asking genuine questions about mine. Thomas and I met for coffee when business brought me to Boston. Our conversations carefully avoiding the landmines of past betrayals while acknowledging their reality. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It was something more measured, a controlled experiment in whether people who had hurt me deeply could earn a limited place in my life through consistent, respectful behavior. The jury was still out, but for the first time in years, I was open to collecting the evidence. As I flew back to California after that final therapy session, gazing down at the patchwork landscape below, I realized I no longer needed my family's validation to feel complete. Whether our tentative reconnection blossomed or withered, I had built a life that stood firmly on its own foundation, one that neither their approval nor their disapproval could shake. The Wall Street Journal headline said it all. Hyperion Security goes public. IPO valued at $1.2 billion. The photo showed me ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, surrounded by my executive team people who had believed in my vision and helped build it into reality. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing with congratulations from industry colleagues, friends, and even my mother, whose message showed genuine pride without any mention of Thomas. After years of limited contact, our relationship had evolved into something cordial, if not intimate, occasional calls, birthday acknowledgments, and a careful avoidance of old triggers. Thomas and I had reached a similar détente. His real estate ventures had achieved modest success after the Harrington debacle, focusing on smaller commercial properties rather than historic landmarks. We'd even collaborated professionally once, when his company needed advanced security systems for a new development and chose Hyperion as the provider. The IPO changed everything, not just professionally, but personally. My net worth, previously substantial on paper, became liquid in a way that transformed my possibilities. After years of reinvesting almost everything into Hyperion, I could finally consider what I wanted for myself, including a permanent home that reflected my accomplishments. During a rare dinner with Thomas while in Boston for business, I mentioned my house hunting plans. I've been living in the same Oakland condo for years, I explained, swirling my wine thoughtfully. It made sense while building the company, but now I want something that feels permanent. A place with character, history, room to breathe. Thomas leaned forward, interest peaked. Any specific areas you're considering? Ideally, something near water, I replied. I miss that about Boston, sometimes the connection to the harbor, the light reflecting off the waves at sunset. What about Marin County? He suggested. There's a historic property on the market there, a 1,920 estate originally built for a shipping magnate. 7 bedrooms, private beach access, incredible views of the bay. My interest was genuine. That sounds exactly what I've been imagining. Does it need much renovation? Some updating, but the bones are perfect old-world craftsmanship you can't replicate today. I know the listing agent. I could send you the details. Maybe even arrange a private viewing before it hits the market officially. The offer seemed thoughtful, a brother using his real estate expertise to help his sister. After exchanging a few more details about the property, its Georgian Revival architecture, the old-growth trees surrounding it, the glass conservatory overlooking the water, we parted with one of our least awkward hugs to date. 2 days later, Thomas sent the listing information as promised, along with stunning photos showing exactly the kind of property I'd been dreaming of, elegant without being ostentatious, historic yet livable, with breathtaking views and the privacy I valued. The agent can show it Friday if you're available, his message read. It won't last long once it's officially listed. Properties like this usually sell within days. I arranged my schedule to make the viewing, excited at the prospect of finally having a home that felt truly mine, not just an investment or a temporary solution, but a sanctuary. The morning of the viewing, I received a cryptic text from my assistant. You might want to check the business section of the Chronicle before your appointment. The headline stopped me cold. Tech scion Thomas Mitchell acquires historic Marin estate for family legacy. The article detailed how Thomas had just closed on the very property he'd suggested to me, quoted as saying it would be the perfect family compound for future generations of Mitchells. For a moment, I sat frozen, unable to process the level of calculation required for this betrayal. Then I called the listing agent directly. I understand the Headlands property has been sold, I said when she answered, keeping my voice neutral. Yes, just yesterday, she confirmed cheerfully. To a Thomas Mitchell. Apparently, he's planning extensive renovations, turning the conservatory into a home theater, modernizing the historic features to create a more contemporary aesthetic. Shame about the original details, but buyers these days want that sleek, updated look. Each word was a twist of the knife. Not only had Thomas stolen my dream home from under me, but he planned to strip away the very historical elements that made it special, the craftsmanship and character I had specifically valued. I hung up and immediately called Sarah, my mentor and now Hyperion's board chair. Remember when you told me never to trust Thomas again? I said when she answered. I should have listened. After explaining the situation, I waited for her. I told you so. Instead, she asked a simple question. What are you going to do about it? I don't know, I admitted. The house is gone. He won. Cassandra Mitchell doesn't admit defeat, she replied firmly. And there's always another house, probably a better one. She was right, of course. I'd let sentimentality cloud my judgment first, in believing Thomas had changed. Then, in becoming emotionally attached to a property I hadn't even seen in person. I threw myself into a new search, working with an exclusive buyer's agent and expanding my criteria. If Thomas wanted a family compound in Marin, I would find something that made his purchase look like a starter home. 3 weeks later, my agent called with barely contained excitement. I found it. The Cliffside Estate in Belvedere. It just came on the market through a private sale after the owner passed away. His heirs want a quick, quiet transaction. The photos he sent left me speechless. Perched on a cliff overlooking the entire bay, the 12,000 square foot mansion dwarfed Thomas's purchase in both size and grandeur. Built in the 1,930 seconds for a film industry pioneer, it featured impeccably maintained historical details alongside tasteful modern updates, 8 acres of landscaped grounds, a guest house, and a private cove with a boathouse. The asking price, $5.2 million, substantially higher than market value for even luxury properties. But the owners were entertaining cash offers only, prioritizing speed and certainty over maximizing profit. It's overpriced, my agent acknowledged, but it's also one of a kind. Properties like this come available maybe once in a generation. I made a decision on the spot. Offer them $5.2 million cash, as asked. But I want to close within 10 days. And I want absolute confidentiality. No press, no announcements, nothing until after I've taken possession. The sellers accepted immediately. While my financial team arranged the wire transfers and my lawyers handled the accelerated paperwork, I maintained my normal routine, giving no indication to Thomas or anyone else that I was making a major purchase. 9 days later, I became the owner of what local real estate insiders considered the crown jewel of Bay Area residential properties. That evening, I sent a brief message to Thomas. Heard about your new house. Congratulations. I found a place too. Housewarming party next Saturday at 4. Address to follow. He responded with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm, unaware of what was coming. The day before the party, I had my assistant call Thomas with the address and gate code. I arranged for a car service to bring my parents from their hotel, ensuring they would arrive at the same time as Thomas. Standing on the vast lawn overlooking the bay, I watched their vehicles approach up the long, winding driveway. The driver stopped at the designated spot, where the full magnificence of the estate was suddenly revealed, the mansion rising majestically against the backdrop of the San Francisco skyline, gardens cascading down the cliffside, the private beach visible below. Thomas emerged first, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he took in the property. My parents followed, my mother's hand flying to her mouth, my father stopping mid-stride, stunned. I approached calmly, house keys in hand, the afternoon sun warming my face. "Welcome to my housewarming," I said simply. Surprised? Thomas recovered first, his face cycling through disbelief, calculation, and finally a forced smile. "Cassie, this is unexpected." "Is it?" I asked, my voice light but pointed. "I mentioned I was house hunting. You suggested a property, then bought it yourself. I found something better. It's a pattern we've established, wouldn't you say?" Mom stepped forward, eyes wide as she took in the sweeping grounds and the mansion behind me. "Cassandra, this is magnificent," she said, genuine awe in her voice. "How did you?" $5.2 million. Cash, I replied, the specificity deliberate. The benefits of building something successful instead of stealing other people's ideas or opportunities. Dad's face darkened. "That's enough, Cassandra. We came here in good faith, not to be insulted." "Did you?" I asked. "Or did you come to see what Thomas told you he'd done, outmaneuvered his sister again? Secured the family legacy he's always promised but never delivered?" Thomas flinched visibly. "That's not fair. I saw a good investment opportunity. In the exact property you knew I was interested in, I finished for him. Just like you saw a good opportunity in my security application in college and in the Harrington building. It's remarkable how your opportunities consistently align with things I've expressed interest in." We stood in tense silence, the beautiful setting at odds with the ugly family dynamic playing out upon it. In the distance, the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the bay in gold and rose. "I didn't invite you here for a confrontation," I said finally, my voice softening slightly. "I invited you here for closure. This house," I gestured to the mansion behind me, "isn't about one-upping Thomas, though I admit there's satisfaction in that. It's about claiming what I've earned through my own work, my own vision, my own persistence, despite having no support from the people who should have believed in me first." I turned directly to my parents. "For 32 years, you told me in 100 different ways that I would never measure up to Thomas, that his dreams deserved investment, while mine deserved skepticism. That his failures warranted second chances while my successes were lucky breaks? Dad started to protest, but Mom placed a restraining hand on his arm. "You were wrong," I continued. "Not just morally wrong in how you treated me, but practically wrong in where you placed your bets. I'm not saying this to hurt you, though I know it does. I'm saying it because I'm done pretending, done minimizing my success to make Thomas comfortable, done accepting crumbs of parental approval, done participating in the fiction that our family dynamic was ever healthy or fair." The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn as I delivered my decision. After today, I won't be in contact. Not out of anger or revenge, but because this relationship doesn't serve my well-being. I've built a life I'm proud of, surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not how I compare to someone else. I deserve that. Everyone does. I hadn't expected what happened next. Thomas, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly sat down heavily on a nearby garden bench, his composure cracking entirely. "You're right," he said, voice breaking, "about all of it. I've spent my entire life riding on privileges I didn't earn, taking what wasn't mine, believing I deserved special treatment." He looked up, tears streaming unchecked down his face. "I was jealous, Cassie. Terrified that if we competed fairly, you'd win every time. So I cheated, stole, manipulated anything to maintain the illusion that I was special." The raw honesty caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness, not confession. "I knew you were smarter than me from the time we were kids," he continued. "You worked harder, saw things more clearly, built things that actually work. Meanwhile, I just talked a good game and relied on Dad's connections. When your company succeeded, it confirmed everything I'd feared, that without the advantages they gave me, I was ordinary." My father stood rigid, jaw clenched, while my mother sank down beside Thomas, her own eyes filling with tears. "We failed you both," she said quietly, looking up at me. "Thomas, by never requiring you to earn what you received. And Cassandra, we failed you by not seeing your extraordinary potential, by making you fight for every scrap of support or recognition." She reached for my hand, which I didn't offer. "I know it's too late for apologies to matter much, but I am truly, deeply sorry." Dad finally spoke, his voice strained. "You've made your point, Cassandra. You're successful. Congratulations. If this display of wealth was meant to put us in our place, mission accomplished." "Richard?" Mom said sharply, surprising all of us with her tone. "For once in your life, listen instead of defending. Our daughter isn't showing off. She's showing us the consequences of our choices that you, primarily, made for this family." The directness of her challenge to him, something I'd never witnessed growing up, created a seismic shift in the family dynamic. Dad's authority, always absolute and unquestioned, suddenly seemed diminished. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time, taking in not just the expensive home, but the confident, accomplished woman I'd become without his approval or assistance. "I don't know how to be wrong," he finally said, the admission clearly costing him. "I built my entire identity around being right about investments, about people, about what success looks like. The idea that I misread my own daughter so completely, I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything with it," I replied. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. Your approval or disapproval no longer factors into my life decisions. I'm not angry anymore. I'm free." As the last light faded from the sky, my family departed Thomas first, shoulders slumped in what seemed like genuine remorse. Then my parents, Mom with the final glance that held more understanding than she'd ever shown me before, Dad still struggling to process the reversal of everything he'd believed about his children's capabilities. I stood alone on the lawn of my new home, emotions swirling like the fog beginning to roll in from the bay. The confrontation hadn't gone as expected, neither the satisfaction of revenge nor the bitterness of continued denial. Instead, there was something messier, more human, a family forced to face its dysfunction, even if too late to repair it. 1 year later, my mansion had become more than a personal residence. The guest house had been converted into headquarters for the Mitchell Foundation for Young Innovators, providing mentorship and seed funding to promising entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The main house, while my primary residence, regularly hosted workshops and networking events for women in tech. I received occasional emails from my mother, which I sometimes answered. Thomas had moved to Chicago to start over, away from both Dad's influence and the shadow of his failures in Boston and the Bay Area. According to Mom, he was working for an established real estate development company, learning the business properly from the ground up. My father had suffered a minor heart attack 3 months after our confrontation. During his recovery, according to Mom's careful updates, he'd begun reluctantly seeing a therapist. "He's trying," she wrote. "Too late for many things, but trying nonetheless." I didn't respond to that particular message. Some wounds were too deep for platitudes, some recognitions too delayed to matter. I'd found my peace not through forgiveness, but through moving forward on my own terms. On a clear spring afternoon, I sat with a young woman named Deja in the glass conservatory overlooking the bay. At 22, she reminded me of myself at that age, brilliant, determined, and faced with systemic barriers to her success. "I keep getting the same feedback," she said. Frustration evident as she discussed her startup's rejected funding applications. "They say my idea has potential but needs more development before it's investment ready." Meanwhile, guys with half-baked concepts and fancy degrees are getting millions in seed funding. I smiled, recognizing the pattern all too well. "Let me see your pitch deck again." As we refined her presentation together, I shared parts of my own journey, the setbacks, the betrayals, the strategic decisions that had eventually led to success. Not as a roadmap to follow exactly, but as proof that barriers, even seemingly insurmountable ones, could be overcome. "The hardest lesson I learned," I told her as we wrapped up our session, "is that success isn't just about proving others wrong, though that has its satisfactions. It's about defining success on your own terms, building something that reflects your values, not just your abilities." Looking out over the water, watching sailboats navigate the currents of the bay, I felt a sense of completion. The mansion around me, impressive as it was, represented not the culmination of my journey, but simply a milestone along it. The real victory wasn't in the property deed or the bank account balance, but in the person I'd become while fighting for what I deserved, and in the opportunities I could now create for others facing similar battles. That evening, sitting on my terrace as lights twinkled on across the bay, I reflected on how far I'd come from that determined girl with a second-hand computer, dismissed and underestimated at every turn. The path hadn't been fair or easy, but it had been mine, and that, ultimately, was what mattered most. What about you? Have you ever had to prove someone wrong who doubted your abilities? Or have you experienced favoritism in your family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this journey of revenge and redemption. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead and then reaching back to help others do the same. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week with another story of overcoming the odds.